Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The session will start in 5 minutes. Please proceed to the ballroom and take your seats. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please proceed to the ballroom and take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, the session is about to start. Please take your seats.
Turn off the lights.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the first panel of the day, please welcome Khadija Ihsan from Median TV.
Is that working? Honorable guests, distinguished ministers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Khadija Ihsan. I'm an anchor at Median TV, a Moroccan-African TV channel, and I'm honored to welcome all of you on behalf of the OCP Policy morning about redesigning education systems, a topic I believe is in the center of a lot of topics that have been and will be discussed here through this 6th edition of the Atlantic Dialogue, especially that we are here in Marrakesh, Imperial City, where 9 centuries ago, Al-Morvid Sultan Ali ibn Yusuf built the largest, the biggest school of North Africa that used to host 900 students a year. But the fact is nowadays, given the child doesn't need to be reformed, it needs to be transformed to meet accession goals, namely employment, and especially shaping and designing future citizens and leaders of Africa. We are very fortunate today to have such distinguished speakers that I'm sure, and I do believe, will help educate us on how to reshape learning students. I now call on stage Her Excellency Assia bin Saleh Alawi, Ambassador at Large of His Majesty King Mohammed VI. She also serves on a number of Board of Trustees of international organizations and think tanks, including l'Institut Royal des Études Stratégiques. Morning, Assia. Bonjour. Please be seated. From the US, Cassie Freeman, President and CEO of the African Diaspora Consortium, and she used to be the head of the Comparative and International Education Society. Ms. Cassie. And from Rwanda, Professor Silas Lwakabamba, former Minister of Education and currently Vice Chancellor of the University of Kibongo. Welcome on stage. And as I usually say, an image, I invite you to watch this video about the topic we'll be discussing today, and we'll get directly to
Unemployment and underemployment rates among youth have dramatically increased in the past decade in Africa. The current education system often fails to provide its youth with adequate skills, even at the most basic level. What are the skills needed in the new technological age? How can children and youth develop them? Should emphasis be put on ICT and digital understanding and fluency? What is the role of technical and vocational education? What can be learned from success cases in the South? Can the education system be reformed from within or radical overhaul?
Yes, and speaking of digitalization, I invite the audience to address their questions through the AD Connect app on SpotMe, so that we will have the pleasure to answer them and to discuss them with the distinguished speakers. Well, first of all, actual education system was designed, or let's say implemented, on a quite different age. And the fact is that today, the revolution, this digitalization is the third revolution, as they say. Asiya, we could what are the priorities to improve this system?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the Atlantic Dialogues to have me here. And thank you, Karim, for this particularly challenging session. One preliminary remark, if you allow me. I think that education is absolutely central to prepare for the whole life. For the new era to come, the challenges are even much greater because of the persistent inequalities, just name it, between cities and rural areas, gender inequalities, rich and poor, and so forth. So, but to stay in our, allow me to say that in this era where the mega trends are rising uncertainties and the extreme speed of technological change, it is extremely difficult to foresee what will remain fiction and what will become reality out of this technological change. Because some advocate that it will lead to massive unemployment, with, of course, all the related upheavals, and others advocate that improved educational system will lead to a peaceful transition. But what education? When we know that most of the children entering schools today will do a job which does not exist yet. That over 50% of the adults are digital illiterate and will have to be trained if we don't want to end up with digital refugees, as Mark Benioff said. So the tremendous is really enormous. What is sure is that it will destroy jobs, but it will create jobs of a different nature. Mm-hmm. So how to cater for these unknown jobs? I think that the different skills have been promoted in order to address these priorities, which is most of all creativity, innovative approach, understanding, cross-cultural reaching and interactions in order to prepare. However, if we look at the education systems around the world, these skills have already been fostered somehow, but unfortunately with the results we know, with a huge mismatch between the training and the labor markets, as unfortunately we experience in our country. That's why now we are moving into massive vocational training to address this mismatch. And at the same time, what priorities, as you say? So the next era will probably be about a new language. With this new language, it will be about watch and monitor, listen and talk, speech recognition and interactions. So we have to make really huge leaps into that domain, and hoping that machines and automation will never replace the human beings, because this is the big fright, of course. So the data, the huge increase in data will be there. The question is how you interpret it, how you deal with it. It will be about the ability to ask the right questions, how to look about the knowledge which is there, because one of the features, it seems to me, of our world, which has already started, is that knowledge is increasingly shared. People don't use new media devices through different devices of learning. The methods will have to change drastically to reach out precisely to ensure education for all, but especially quality education. So we will be talking, about all this.
Sure.
So this is the problem we are facing, really a real headache. And unfortunately, success stories do exist. There are a few bright spots, but unfortunately, the problem to address all, when we talk about, 1 billion in Africa, as I have seen yesterday, you really get dizzy. How to address, how to secure quality education for all. I think this is really one of the most difficult questions.
Speaking of successful stories, Vusile Mbakwayo, which is a very successful South African entrepreneur, once said in a conference like this one that we work with an economic model we didn't build in Africa. Professor Silas, we know that Rwanda has planned its economic shift its own way. Is it the case as well for education to meet the goals that Assia just spoke about?
Yes, in a number of ways, passed through a number of things which was tragic. And when after the war and the genocide, they realized that the system was more shifted towards humanities. In actual fact, the country cannot depend on humanities. They found that the university was producing very few people. The numbers of graduates in the population was very low, less than 0.01% in the population. And obviously, by that time, they realized that in order to have a sustainable system, you need about 10% of the graduate in the population. And it would have taken us thousands of years to really reach that. So we have to look at the whole system, primary, secondary school, and towards the university. It attract experts from outside. And I think that's a policy which the government took, to attract experts from outside to come and assist in so many ways, especially in the area of science and technology. It was one way where I was attracted to start an institution of science and technology at university level. And being a Tanzanian, I've been there now for 20 years. It reached a point where I was even made a minister, being a Tanzanian. And they, experts, tried a policy of trying to use the resources which we have internally to try to increase the input and output of the numbers of students. They tried a policy where we even changed the language. Initially, it used to be French,
Yes.
and then it mixed was French and English, and eventually now from 2009, we went to totally the first 3 years primary, and the first 3 years of primary are in local language, but after the fourth year onwards, it will be in English. Because we realized that when we are combining both of the languages, we're producing people who don't know even English. Or in order to increase the numbers, we even got the resources. The people, even at village level, were involved in contributing their resources, either monetary or even contributing other resources like building, putting up bricks and building up the classrooms. And actually, this increased the throughput of the numbers of people. So we had to look at our own homegrown solutions in so many ways. And homegrown solutions included issues of how do we look at the gender balance? How do we look at the issues of corruption and so on and so forth? Issues of the dialogue, national dialogue, on how do we move forward. Every year, for example, Monday and Tuesday president, every year it has been done for so many years. And every February and March, you review what has been done through the government retreat, again chaired by the president. So we had to review all economic sectors, and education was one of them.
Yes.
And I think it has moved quite well in that way.
Yes. My next question is to Cassie, and again, I invite the audience to address their questions through the AD app, Spot Me, so that we might discuss them later. Cassie, we know that in the U.S. there is a huge interest toward new technologies, and is this an important? Does it have an important place within, and is it generalized or in all education system?
Thank you. Let me say I'm honored and pleased to be here with such a distinguished panel. And at first I want to approach this from a couple of ways. One, I'd like to suggest that or two different questions perhaps that we could raise as a panel. One is to rethink the, for example, the title, Redesigning Higher Education System, to perhaps consider, is it possible to consider a title of Designing Excellent Education Systems with Outcomes? There are no system or organizations that are redesigned consistently as higher education. And what that does is, and all of the influence on redesigning comes from external forces. It from accrediting of society, it comes from corporations, it comes from political leaders. And so because they are consistently in a perpetual state of redesign, it's very difficult to have systems, design systems that are excellent, that work well consistently, and that are better aligned with the needs of the skill set needs for the future. So I really want to think. And the other question that I want us to think about is really how do we redesign, how do we develop programs, prepare global citizens who are much more culturally aware. And I'm going to return to that, I'm sure, during the course of our discussion. But more specifically in terms of the issues around digital, preparing students who are digitally literate, the International Literary Association just in 2017 came out with a report, and so happened to be on that report is one of our leading scholars, who works with us, Dr. Ernest Morrell. And one of the things that they said is that there tends to be a focus on digital literacy from the perspective of the differences between, which we know, rural and urban students, but more focus tends to be on hardware, the differences, who has what equipment, whereas they're making the case that the ILA is making the case that there needs to be much more focus on the pedagogy as it relates to the use of the hardware. So, and I want to say that they basically place squarely the responsibility for equalizing, addressing the digital divide on governmental agencies. This is their suggestion, governmental agencies and political leaders who are much funding, not, as I said, not just for the hardware, but who will basically provide much more professional development to provide to address the differences in terms of students' skills as it relates to the digital divide. So Yes, there's a need to do so. We know we have the gap, but it's something that I think that governmental and political leaders need to really spend some time focusing on, not, as I said, not just the differences in the hardware, but definitely the differences in professional development and how to use the hardware in a way that produces the kind of outcomes that students need in a globalized world.
Asiya, you've mentioned this huge transformation, the big data, and with the advancement in the figure out which jobs robots won't be able to do tomorrow.
Well, the problem is that, how you devise, for such jobs. The certainly, digital and ICT will stay absolutely compulsory to deal with the new era. And that's why it's absolutely crucial and critical that people will accede to that. But how you accede to that is the question. And Cassie has been mentioning a few things, including redesigning comes from external incentives. But the problem, here, yesterday, we have heard quite extremely encouraging from both from the plenary sessions, how you change African narrative, reality. And we have heard identity, responsibility, leadership, and all these related cultural features. And I was as well, convinced that you have to design it from within with your indigenous knowledge of cultural background, of expertise, and what ambition you have for the future. What is the long-term vision? What type of society you are ambitioning to build? I figured it out as well from the breakout dinner because I attended about youth, 1 billion youth. It's extremely encouraging to hear from them, of course, the necessity to cater for highly skilled jobs and how you prepare for that, and this is absolutely critical. But at the same time, I have heard the will of this youth to engage in the transformation of their own society. There is a real demand, perhaps not for politics as it is carried out now, but in civil society, being aware that, of course, civil society cannot be a substitute to political parties and the intermediaries that organize democratization. But still, it is extremely encouraging because you really have to rely on the national expertise. Even if we have the same common challenges, you really have to reckon on, and in that regard, the OECD recommendations, the 6 recommendations of the OECD are exactly on line with that. That you have first to build consensus about the aim of the reform. Make sure that all the stakeholders are associated. Make sure as well in the second place that the teachers and the learning community is really associated upstream in the designing of the very reforms, and not only to implement, to be as well associated. You have as well to make sure that you go for some because the drama with education is that you are engaging generations, entire generations. If you make a mistake, it can be fatal for those generations, and it's extremely difficult to make up and to correct, those. And of course, the basic question, normally I start always with what should we do, how should we do it, and who pays? So the most important thing is to get the sustainable finance all through the reform. Otherwise, you get nowhere. Because sometimes people start and they get broke, and so of engagement, and then you get nowhere. And of course, you have as well to make sure that you are inside, on the regional level, and worldwide. And that's why I think that external support, whether we like it or not, is absolutely crucial.
That's exactly what Professor Silas
Yes,
was mentioning
absolutely.
about what Rwanda did to rebuild or reform its educational system while calling expats to help them build a system that goes within the cultural patterns of the country. But should the emphasis, and this question is, Cassie mentioned the importance of, or not importance of the hardware, but should we put the emphasis on the technological or the other aspect or vocational aspects? Because at the end of the day, there are choices that are made, and I'm speaking to the chairman of the University of Kibungo. Is it like, do we take into consideration what are the vocations of those students, apart from the technological aspect?
Yeah, in our experience, actually, if you look at Rwanda and quite a number of African countries, we tended to aim to higher level training of parts and so on and so forth. And a lot of times when they started at a technical level, people wanted to push towards higher education, training engineers and so on and so forth. They disregarded the technical and vocational training. A lot of time they look down on it. It took quite a bit of time in quite a number of countries, like Rwanda, for example. Tanzania, the system had been set up for a long time ago. But quite a number of countries, let's say Francophone countries, it was not the case. So it was much more regarded as a lower level type of training, and it was not desirable. And the parents were pushing their kids to go towards a higher level training. But then the countries realized that a number of things happened, that you can't run the economy by using only top-level training. It's not possible. You need to be supported by technicians. You need to be supported by other skilled, workers, and you need more of that than even the engineers themselves or other highly trained people, whether it's doctors or vis-a-vis nurses and engineers, vis-a-vis the technicians and so on and so forth. Then policies were set up, and quite a number of countries now are picked up. And in the case of Rwanda, for example, graduates who came out of universities realized that they don't get employment for a number of reasons, whether the private sector is not so big, skills required to be employed from university level. A number of students, actually, if you look at our countries, the number of students going to universities is getting lower and lower for some reason.
Is it like negative? Because if we hear that, we tend
it
to
is lower.
think that
It is actually
it is
getting
wrong.
It is getting lower. The access to higher education now is getting lower. And this is because I realize personally that maybe students don't get employment, and the parents and the students want to put in their and stay for 1 or 2, 3, 4 years without employment. So even those who went to universities, they started now going back to technical to even employ themselves. So the technical and vocational training is now growing much bigger than even the higher education, much bigger, and much more popular than the higher education sector. So things are changing. And the countries realize that, okay, these people we needed, they are putting so much resources into it. So we still need to give skills to the people. And I think we need to combine also, when you are at a university level, you need to also combine the technical vocational skills so that people can come up with both, the total knowledge and vocational skills. And this takes me to another point, which I think is lacking. And that's why we have missed it quite a lot. In the past, the universities in the 70s were running universities. We used to link up with the private sector very well, and we knew what is required. The private sector used to come in and advise us what type of programs we should run for the future jobs. But we tended now, because we had massification of universities, we forgot to bring in now the private sector, to know what is the employment sector wants, the labor markets wants. And this has even produced to the extent that you produce graduates for the sake of producing graduates, and they are not aimed to anything. So I think we need to go back and try to find out how do we link very well with the private sector. I'm glad it is starting, is already started by the private sector, and it's linkage straight. If you go to a student, I was lucky to visit yesterday. If you look at what the students are doing, they started with practical problems right from year one, and they actually solve quite a number of problems which are required. And the students come up with projects which some of them can even get out of the university and continue to work on those projects, employ themselves, rather than depending on employment from outside. So this is something which I think very positive. So we need to rethink, to design our programs. Whom do we work with? What type of stakeholders we need when we are designing our institution, university programs? Like as I said, students are not coming anymore to universities because they realize that they are not getting any jobs after they come out.
Speaking about these skills, what are the kind of skills, Cassie, that you think about? These technological skills, these skills that has Professor Silas just mentioned, and that would meet with the future jobs, so that this future generation, either entrepreneurs or employed from private sectors, could find jobs.
Right. Thank you. It's difficult because, I mean, if you think about the fact that, 10 years out, we really have no sense of what the new skill requirements will be. So that's the reason I think that, 50 years out is, we know that there are going to be some better use, we have to do more emphasis on soft skills, what I would refer to as, and this is the reason I said from the beginning about, the constant redesign. There are some things that universities have always done well that are always going to be necessary to prepare students for the labor market. That is communication skills, problem-solving skills, analytical skills, in a new, in the age we are in now related to technology, data, research data skills, constants with universities, and they have to be. The way in which universities can address preparation for the skills that are needed for tomorrow, really it has to be on a more short-term basis. For example, if we know we're in a period now where big data is required, students have, data production positions are required, then universities can work with corporations and to help develop those on a short-term basis, because why would a university commit all of this direction to positions that are no longer going to be available in 10 years from now? We don't really know what those are. So I think universities is focused really on the things that universities do well, and to, on a more short-term, 7 years out, what those needs are going to be from corporations, to incorporate those on a more short-term basis. The other piece, as it relates to vocational versus vocational training versus more general education training, I would suggest this, that what happens typically in countries is if it's not done well, it really keeps vocational training because what happens is families who can afford more will send their kids to their students to the positions that are going to over time provide lifelong learning skills that we know that will be necessary to address different positions going forward. but the students whose families don't have that kind of vision or support continue to stay in the vocational positions or positions that are not over time allowing them the growth and development and opportunities that will come with societies that change their skill sets and developments over time. So I'm very, very much in favor of that, but vocational, addressing vocational training and preparation. But I think we, as society, should be very cautious about the way I like to describe it. The mix is right. So if it's vocational training is very important, then have people have some of the haves in vocational position and have more of the have-nots in the more generalized positions.
I do feel that Asiya has a reaction toward what Professor Silas just was talking about, and you as well. Please, Asiya.
Well, I cannot agree more. What we really need is that we need to rehabilitate vocational training because it is despised by the best students, and they think that it is really good just for the left outs and the dropouts. And you try to recuperate, by the way, with outs, that it is absolutely critical to devise special retraining, re-employment, and OCP skills have been involved in this, and an institution that I was chairing in Marseille as well, to provide, because this is really the problem, how you recuperate over 30% of the students who really cost a fortune to the states and who are a huge burden for the families as well. We have both considerations to take into account. At the same time, I think that we have not insisted enough on the methods and devices. We really need as well to introduce a real revolution in methods. As I have known it as professor of international law with large numbers, amphitheaters full of 1,000 students, can be reached out from remote positions. You will need much more classroom for workshops in order to have this particularly, vocational training and more practical training. So you do need certainly, the mix, and the devices and the hardware are still necessary. You see how, what place computers have taken in our life, but we still have to master the language. I hate to see your time is up, and you're totally blocked. So we have to learn the speed and how to respond, how to interact with all these devices. And at the same time, the question is that great numbers for personalized, tailored learning, because that is the trend. Teaching and learning. You have to go to field experience. You have as well, the exams will be changing. So how you cater for all this? This is huge problems because we are facing numbers, which is not the case in the North. Because in the North, you have having dwindling numbers of students, and I have seen American universities coming to Morocco and begging me, to help them find students who can pay, so they can keep on, we have just the reverse. We have numbers, and we have to address, these numbers in a really, to make sure that inequalities, which are devastating to not make it if we keep the rhythm of inequalities as it is nowadays. So how you cater for the numbers? We have seen, this learning partnership that Microsoft has been devising, for instance, for Africa, which is quite popular and which is quite successful. But we are talking of 20 million teachers and community of learners, while the numbers are 1 billion youth in the year 2050. So our challenge in how you transform these small success stories and bright spots, how you can disseminate them for all, how you can make quality education. I was talking with the previous president of Costa Rica yesterday. I visited Costa Rica to find small buildings, schools, 2 classrooms in the middle of nowhere, right in the forest. So this is what we really need. How in Morocco we can reach out to the high Atlas Mountain, which are totally remote, extremely difficult to reach. And of course, how you can produce a favorable environment which is conducive to have people even send people to school and educate, and especially I'm talking here about women. Women, unfortunately, still retain their because it's cheap labor or free labor, and they are doing things that they shouldn't, and they are prevented from going to school. And address. So the challenge, I think, for our region is to foster R&D. We have to know more about our own needs, the future of our needs, more about artificial intelligence, and at the same time address all this mix of problems. We are in the 21st century, but somehow we are still in the Middle Ages. So how you make these two extremes meet and try, to provide education for all, which is really the necessity that our ambition in.
You mentioned the example of Costa Rica. That is an example in many other ways, and the country just finished the year using just exclusively green energy. That is an example to follow. Silas, what are the other success that can maybe be an example, or maybe we can get inspired from in Africa, taking into consideration, as we've been talking about, our cultural patterns?
Yeah, there are quite a number of examples of, in quite a number of areas.
Mm-hmm.
Rwanda obviously came out of, we had a lot of poor people. So we had to look within ourselves and how can we help the poor people to afford even sending their kids to schools, even managing to feed their kids. One of the things which they did was to look at the culture ways. The Rwanda people had a lot of cows in the past. The rich ones had some cows, and the poor ones didn't have. So it was a question of, they started a system where they call it one cow per family, which they managed to distribute to the poor families. And the poor families managed at least to get from milk, for example, the cows, and then from the manure to fertilize their farms and so on and so forth. So the kids somehow were fed. They could afford to send their kids to school and so on and so forth. So that impacted to the education system, because quite a number of kids were dropping out, even if they went to school. Mm-hmm. First of all, they were not well fed, and secondly, they were dropping out. And this affected quite a number of ways. Now, coming to education itself, we tried an experiment in Rwanda where we called World Vision. We requested a number of ideas from the population, from the people, to try to contribute what will improve on our education system. So we managed to get some resources, and we got about 26 projects, which were tried as a pilot in certain districts. One example, as I said, like Dropout, the innovation here was how do we use parents to manage to get involved so that the kids don't drop out of school, to keep monitoring the kids, because sometimes the kids will say they're going to school, they don't actually go to school. They find a way of getting somewhere else and so on and so forth. But now, involving the parents managed to find a way of monitoring the kids, and they will stay in school.
Okay.
The other way was the issue of literacy and numeracy. how do we use the parents, even if they not educated themselves, so that they can teach the kids how to count, simple counts using their facilities like sticks and whatever and so on and so forth in the house, and even to read. So these were experiments which were tried over 2 years, and eventually we selected a number of them which worked in quite a number of districts, tried to scale them up nationwide. You can use the people, with the private sector or whatever, to come up with ideas how to improve the education quality and try to improve the education. So these are things I think one can learn from quite a number of countries, and they can be tried. So innovation in education is possible, and I think if you involve the stakeholders, it can also be done. So this is something which I think is something positive, which could be. There are quite a number of cases which I think I don't want to say quite a number. As I said, there are 26 projects, which quite a number of them work very well, including mentoring of teachers. That's another way, including teaching, because there was transition from the first 3 years of a primary school where they're teaching Kinyarwanda. Now they are to transit to it well. So we had to revise an innovation project, how to do it well. What type of textbooks should you use, which will be suitable for the kids, and so on and so forth. And how do you teach? You know, quite a number of our teachers, they are, you know, traditional, the way they teach and so on and so forth. How do you use the mentors to be able to teach them, to show the best way, the best method of teaching in the classrooms and so on and so forth. So this affected our education system. So innovation can work, and it's not very expensive, but you know, if you involve all the stakeholders, they can come up with the ideas which you can pick up, and they use it in the education system.
Okay, and now we'll pick up maybe some questions. Application Spot Me, and if you kindly project them on with our speakers, panelists. Okay, the first one. So the question is about re-educate the educators, which is very important since it goes to the basis of it and to the people who give the knowledge to the students, who delivers the knowledge. What role should be played by the families and the schools? So let's start with the educators. Maybe Cassie, maybe, or Asia, re-educate the educators.
Well,
please.
go ahead. Please. You know, very definitely, that's a big role of education systems, and I think higher education systems can play, you know, a major role in that. You know, through professional development, through ongoing professional development, through you know, engagement. I mean, having students have a bigger role in terms of talking about what their interests and needs are. But there, I think, is also an opportunity for different types of partnerships to work well too, so that as because of the tremendous role that the influence, I should say, that corporations, there is a way in which I think that the needs of the society can be, you know, better expounded, and higher education systems can both fit those needs with the needs of students as they transition to the labor market in different ways, but at the same time, providing time, figuring out what new skills, rather, that, you know, upcoming educators will need as they're moving forward. So I think it's a combination, but I think that professional development at every level of schooling we know works, and we know it works well when it's in creative and innovative ways. But let me just say this: we need to move away from. I mean, I'm not talking about what I'm saying. The reason I said let's focus on designing education, excellent education system with outcome, is because there are some things that work well. And if we are in constant state of redesign, you can't focus on the things that do work well. And one of those things is the way in which education system, I think, have focused on re-educating educators as well as others.
Since we're talking about education, it's very interesting to see that someone has thought about families and schools, and you've been talking about combination. There's a combination that we tend to forget about, Asia. What is the role, what are we to assess those goals?
Well, the role of families is absolutely central. The drama that we are seeing is that sometimes families are too illiterate or too poor to cater both. They still have a basic role in shaping the personality of their children, but sometimes they don't have the capacities and the capabilities to address that. So let me just jump in about, re-educating and training the trainers. This is an experience that we had in Morocco. I have been teaching international law for over 30 years, and I have never seen any inspection, any evaluation, any auditing. Well, but I think that we do need to promote the culture of auditing and evaluation in our country, or external. When I was on the UNDP Board of Advisors for the MENA region, we tried to make a quality assessment of higher education across the region. And evaluation is not just part of the culture. And it is not admitted. And there is a huge resistance to that. Especially teachers do not like, to be evaluated by their own pupils. While now, if we really want to move to more efficiency and more tailor-made education, we really have to go through that process. Another thing is that, is not really taken for granted. It requires means, and it requires trainers of the trainers. So how you do that when you don't have local and indigenous expertise?
True.
So that's why I think partnerships are absolutely crucial, and dialogue. Dialogue is compulsory between governments and unions of the community of learners. Otherwise you get nowhere, because there is a basic difference between knowledge and wisdom. And I think that in Africa we have a lot of wisdom, and I think that we can learn from what this wisdom tells us. Huntington has not said only, shock of civilization. He has insisted as well on a very positive way, how you reactivate tradition to make it efficient for the new. And we have here, I think, some kind of resources, both in Africa and in the Muslim Arab world, resist and to face the shocks, the trials, adversity, and so on. We can build on this and promote, of course, curiosity and creativity, because we have the bulk of youngsters, of youth, which is as well an asset and which really needs to be addressed.
Yeah. The question about humanities schools, and because they are cheaper to set up and more profitable as a business. In the beginning of the talk, you mentioned this humanities aspect and choice of students, but because of background. Do you think that is still true? I mean, is it a profitable business today to have a humanities school?
Let me divert a bit. I think I want to talk to the last speaker about the issue of retraining and auditing and so on and so forth. I always wonder why pilots are required to be tested every few years.
Yeah.
Why? Because they have our lives in their hands. Now you find teachers have got lives of our kids in their hands, the life of the profession in their hands, and so on and so forth. So why don't we retrain the educators? Why don't we insist to audit them and find them whether they are fitting into the future of the countries or the labor market or whatever you want to do? I think we should really insist on that one. If we can do that, it can make a lot of difference. Definitely, talking about humanities, this is a big problem. You know, in quite a number of our countries, you find that the private sector come in because they can only afford to set up institutions in the humanities, and they cannot go in the technical side. Mm-hmm. They set up a lot of these, you know, they train lawyers, they train managers, they train, you know, all sorts of, you know, humanities people. Okay, they are required. But on the other hand, in what numbers? And so on and so forth. You end up training so many lawyers or training so many managers in the market itself. So you find them, you still find them. So, but it's now the government to come in with a policy which will regulate that type of institutions. Where should we go in? You should have maybe a strategic plan for the whole higher education sector, mm-hmm. which is linked to the national development goals, and where does it fit? I mean, in other countries where they have all sorts of resources, they can do it. But in quite a number of our countries where we have very limited resources, it's very difficult really to just do whatever you want.
Indeed. Because
they might end up in... I think there needs to be some sort of a regulation, linking especially with the development goals of any nation, waste our resources anyhow.
And this question about this Chinese model, or maybe I would make it more general, Asian model, should we look into their model more deeply? Ladies? Should we look to this Asian model as the model to be inspired from? Is it far or close to our patterns again?
Sorry to tell you, the problem as well, you know, is the capacity to respond, and the cultural background is basically different. And at the end of the day, what is education about? It's about educating human citizens to become civically responsible in order to lead societies and at the best to transform them. So that's why humanities are still extremely relevant. And we see now, you know, in big management, we see a lot of big, you know, firms trying to train their own personnel just, you know, to learn how to think, how to... philosophy has come back. History is absolutely basic.
Right.
And how to write a decent, even CV, you know, otherwise you are turned off before even, you know, the people can read this. So I think this is lost from sight. Of course, jobs are necessary. Of course, earning a living, income is absolutely compulsory, otherwise you get nowhere. But the human beings who will be able to adapt to a fast changing realities in order to transform. I think that we really have a crisis of leadership in Africa. This is absolutely obvious. And we have as well a crisis sometimes of just a few logics, because people jump into innovation because it is fashionable, because sometimes it's easy. And sometimes I get very cross because even research, instead of being local specific and geared towards local needs, is fund-driven, and it looks somewhere else. You look there because there is light, but you don't look at the dim places which really need bad answers. So this is this equation between research and development and the requirements that we really need. I have experienced this when I was at the CJR as well, and that's why we were trying to build partnership between purchase power and the poor people who do need new terms of germaplasm of innovation, but who doesn't have the means to pay for it. So we have to make sure that innovation and research and development is as well for the poorest, and that we can take advantage. And through partnership and through new devices, through mechanisms of leadership, you can cater through. And NGOs have a tremendous role to play here between strategic development and dissemination in order to make sure that we get what we are really looking for.
Cassie, speaking of cultural, we've been, before the beginning of this session, we've been discussing this very ambitious program that you've launched in the US, a class specified to African diaspora. This is something very important while talking about cultural patterns, right?
Yeah, one of the things that we, our organization in partnership with Teachers College, Columbia University, the University of Notre Dame, and Tuskegee University in Alabama, realized that there, I think we all do, speaking of history and knowledge and knowledge production, realized that there is such a huge gap between know and understand about African descendants, particularly those that were dispersed during the transatlantic slave trade. And so what we set out to do was to develop through the College Board, which does SAT testing, and they have all advanced placement courses under their umbrella. What we set out to do was to develop their first ever African diaspora advanced placement course for secondary students. And it really has ways. One, across ethnic groups, students are really engaged with the content. They have realized that they didn't know. They've not recognized the similarities and the commonalities between the experiences of African descendant in particularly countries, European countries who were dispersed during the transatlantic slave trade, South American countries, and North American countries as well. And so it has exceeded our expectations. It's in its early stages, but we envision the possibility of offering such a course across cultures. Imagine what that will do if students have similar knowledge about their experiences across cultures. And that's the other point that I want to make too, is about preparing students who are much more globally aware. We cannot, let me just underscore that, we cannot think that we can prepare, whether regardless of what skill sets are required. Individuals cannot be successful managing individuals who are, and we know this over time, who are culturally different, who they have no sense of their history or their understanding. And I'm not one to emphasize that we can't keep doing, obviously, the old familiar diversity groups where people are falsely coming to use. But what we can do is, like we're doing with this African diaspora advanced placement course, is we can provide individuals knowledge across groups, and they'll have a better sense of how to, in their working group relationships or team groups or managing different individuals from different countries, they will have a much stronger sense of what individuals have, not only their experiences, because I don't mean that from a negative perspective, but they will have a much stronger sense of all that individuals have added to different societies. And that will require a nationalist model of education to a more international global model of education and in a global society, in addition to the other skill sets that we've talked about. Because regardless of whether it's engineering or what other big data positions are available as their skill sets going forward, the basics are going to be required, as my colleague said. It's always going to be, corporations are always going to look for individuals who have communication skills, problem-solving skills. So we have to find a way as a higher education system to manage that in terms of addressing what they're now calling upskills, which is the same thing as things or things that are rehashed over time. But we have to provide environments that will provide that. So it's the first one in history in the U.S., and it's being offered now in the beginning and in New York, Brooklyn, New York, and a school in Alabama, because we wanted to see the impact on different locations, students across different groups. And they have already asked us to increase where we're going to offer it by 10 more schools going forward.
I hope we will have the opportunity to meet again and to know more about the results of this program, Cassie. We still have 5 minutes. I wonder if we do have some questions from the audience, like direct questions, not through the app. And yes, we do. Right? No women? Maybe the lady in the front, and I'll just ask you to kindly ask short questions so that we can go through the others. Please.
Okay. Martine Capel. Education is very, very close to my heart, and I have lots of questions, but I keep it to one. One of the issues that we're facing in Africa is stunting. And stunting is both from lack of nutritious food, but it's also from lack of personal safety, and thereby development of the brain. And that development of the brain also affects the decision-making process, ability of being a visionary, etc. So how do we address to some extent in some schools, because the teachers are beating up the kids, that's a fact in many of the rural areas, and they're not able at the moment to give the qualities and that sort of human nutrition to the kids that will help them go beyond the stunting and be able to be young decision makers that can deal with their own lives.
Maybe Silas, you've mentioned these kind of issues that young students face in particular areas of our dear continent.
I think over and above what I said with the 1 cow per poor family, there are other things which we have tried to do. Quite a number of things. We try to mobilize resources so that each school, in actual fact, the school that gets a cup of milk and then they get fed. A cup of milk during the break and then they have lunch. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to just depend. They make very, very small contribution. Normally, just to make sure that they're responsible, but very, very small contributions. And obviously, a number of the population is graded in terms of poverty. And those who cannot afford, they are assisted. Those who can afford, they are asked to contribute a bit. But otherwise, the government puts in some resources from that. There is what they call, I'm sure you know it, about capitation. The schools are given some resources to cover such things as feeding and other things. Unfortunately, sometimes if you don't monitor it very well, we try to avoid corruption by monitoring the numbers, which you get feedback from the headmaster, and so on and so forth. So we give them the capitation grants according to the numbers of the kids they have in schools. And part of these capitation grants is to feed the kids. So we have tried to solve it that way, otherwise it becomes a problem. Over and above what I said earlier, they're trying to solve the poor people's poverty in terms of providing, let's say, 1 cow per child, and so on.
Maybe
it's a bigger problem. It's a bigger problem than what our grants are now. And the ministers of education, the ministers of health are all involved, and so on. Yeah.
Okay, 2 more other questions, and unfortunately we don't really have the time. Sir, behind.
Thank you.
And then you come later.
Very interesting discussion. Could we kind of elaborate on the need for interdisciplinarity? I mean, the problems now are very complex, and yet our education system is siloed. How do we provide this system-level approaches to within our education system to cope with the complexity of the skill sets needed by future?
I think Asia has maybe maybe we just
Well, I
add
tried
some
to. I would like
points.
just to say, Professor Rabia, for his question. Of course, you know, the problem is that you have the dilemma between going deeper in your own specialty and then be competitive, because we are in an era of over-competitiveness, or try to scatter and have a package of knowledge which will empower you to be able to address complexities. I think there are various ways of doing it, but sometimes it's really difficult because it needs extra time, it needs extra curriculum. It's not really something that you do naturally, unfortunately. Very quickly, I would like to address the poverty, you know, problem, because we have so many...
Because we don't have extra time, as you've been mentioning, extra time.
No,
yes,
just
maybe
very briefly, because
yes.
Unfortunately, all the efforts that are being made by, just name it, UNICEF, World Food Programme, and so forth, are not enough to address the nutrition and food safety requirements, you know, of the kids. And moreover, I have to insist that in my own country, even at the university level, unfortunately, scholarships are sometimes used to feed a whole family, not only the student. So it is basic to address the poverty problem if we really want the education for all.
But I do want to just add to that one of the things that we have done is by bringing the, you know, having an organization working in partnership with, you know, bringing together the, you know, best of talent of like economics of education scholars, historians, pedagogical experts, other international experts together to develop this particular course as our first model, and to do that across different countries. So it's not just a, in our case, not an African diaspora course that's just US based, it's based with international partners. So that's one way in which bringing universities together across a particular issue or concern, I hate using the word problem, but you know, a particular dilemma that can be addressed, bringing interdisciplinary approach
on such challenging topic. But
yes.
I would like to thank you all for this very enriching discussion. Understand this remodeling, reshaping of the learning systems that would be accurate to our cultural patterns here in Africa and in other parts of the world. Again, Silas, Asiya, and Cassie, thank you very much. I would like to invite you all to the next session that will be moderated by my fellow Adama Gaye and his very famous big smile. The AD talk will be on the link between foreign and development policy. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you. Thank you. Adama Gaye, if he's on the...
Mesdames, Mesdemoiselles, Messieurs, bonjour et donc bienvenue à cette nouvelle session de ce qu'on peut considérer de fantastiques discussions ou même de vieilles salutations ont un espace et qui permettent donc d'être ici pour discuter de sujets importants à la fois pour l'Afrique et je pense pour le reste de la planète. Je vous remercie d'être ici. Mon nom, Khadija vous l'a dit, c'est Adama Gaye, je suis du Sénégal. Et donc, je suis votre serviteur aujourd'hui comme modérateur de ce panel que l'on pourrait croire surgit de notre âge. Il s'agit de discuter de politique étrangère et de stratégie de développement. Pour commencer, accueillir ici, sous vos applaudissements, les deux panélistes qui vont partager cette plateforme avec moi. J'invite M. Hubert Védrine et M. Kozazana Moyo. Merci beaucoup. Je ne vais pas être très long dans la présentation de ces deux panélistes. Je voudrais pour commencer dire qu'ils s'avancent et se trouvent sans, disons, jeu de mots à ma droite et sans connotation idéologique. Je pense que c'est l'un des rares, pour ne pas dire le seul francophone, à avoir, disons, un terme, n'est-ce pas, qui a fait autorité dans le monde de l'après-guerre froide, dans la lignée de ces concepts créés par de grands auteurs comme Francis Fukuyama, avec la fin de l'histoire, avec ce que cela a entraîné, avec le choc des civilisations de M. Huntington, Samuel Huntington, ou encore M. Kennedy, Paul Kennedy et son livre Croissance et déclin des empires. Alors c'est M. Védrine, et il est le concepteur de ce que l'on a appelé l'hyperpuissance. Donc c'est un intellectuel de premier ordre en France, mais au-delà de cela, c'est aussi un pays qui nous a réunis aujourd'hui, les affaires étrangères, parce qu'il a été aussi ministre des Affaires étrangères de la France. Donc c'est le à gauche, sans jeu de mots aussi, M. Nkosazana Moyo, ceux d'entre vous qui ne le connaissez pas, I don't know if I have to do it in English for you, please. Mr. Moyo is from Zimbabwe. He is shortly, he has been trade minister of his country, and after that he went 10 months, if I got you right. After that he went to Washington and worked for IFC, and then he ended up running the Mandela Institute in South Africa. But more importantly, after what has been called and can be termed as the first coup 000 in the world that has been accepted, soft coup, Mr. Moyo is one top job in Zimbabwe. He is a presidential candidate in his country. So please salute him, to start with. Alors, voilà, ce que je voulais vous proposer, c'est de commencer, puisque j'ai le micro, à poser un certain nombre de questions ici, et après quoi la parole vous sera donnée, puisqu'il faudrait que chacun puisse participer à cette discussion afin que nous en tirions quelque chose avantageusement à tous. Ma première question, c'est que si le développement et la prospérité sont encore des sujets sur lesquels il y a un consensus, on les considère comme importants, comme objectifs, il me semble que la politique étrangère est devenue un de ces sujets problématiques. C'est à se demander si la politique étrangère, c'est encore quelque chose qui existe. Dans un monde où les territoires physiques s'effondrent, où ce que j'appelle la tectonique des plaques, n'est-ce pas, portée par l'Internet. Quand je dis tectonique, ce n'est pas l'ancienne tectonique, mais cette fois-ci avec un H qui porte l'Internet, les télécommunications et tout. Est-ce que aujourd'hui, et c'est la première question que je voudrais poser à nos deux intervenants, la politique étrangère est un sujet qui tient encore. Est-ce que dans ce monde plat, dans ce monde de diplomatie sans mur, on peut encore parler de politique étrangère? Monsieur Védrine, pour commencer.
Eh bien, d'abord, je pense que la question du développement et des stratégies économiques est une chose. La question des stratégies internationales et des politiques étrangères en est une autre. Regardez par exemple l'exemple de la Chine. Depuis la révolution Deng Xiaoping à l'origine, ils ont eu une extraordinaire politique économique très efficace. Pendant une trentaine d'années, ce n'est que maintenant qu'apparaît une politique étrangère, une politique globale de la Chine. Dans le cas de la Russie, c'est un peu l'inverse. Depuis le mandat de Poutine III, il y a une politique étrangère russe qui est redevenue vigoureuse, qui ne prétend pas redevenir la superpuissance d'autrefois. Entre parenthèses, je parlais d'hyperpuissance pour les États-Unis dans la décennie 90.
90, bien sûr.
Après, non. Donc la Russie, c'est l'inverse. Il y a une vraie stratégie politique qui a montré sa capacité de blocage en Ukraine et en Syrie, mais il n'y a pas de vraie stratégie économique. La Russie continue à dépendre du sous-sol, en fait. Le Japon a eu des politiques étrangères identifiables. C'est une politique économique, une politique multilatérale, par obligation. Vous voyez, l'Allemagne, ce n'est que maintenant qu'on voit apparaître les éléments et beaucoup de prudence d'une politique étrangère allemande. La France, c'est l'inverse. Pour des raisons de tradition et d'ambition, il y a une politique étrangère française qu'on peut approuver ou désapprouver, c'est un autre sujet. Mais une politique étrangère française forte, proclamée, plus ou moins selon les présidents, mais qui est quand même toujours là, indépendamment de la situation économique française. Ça fait très peu d'années qu'en France, on se dit, pour continuer à avoir notre rôle et notre ambition, il faudrait quand même qu'on arrive à faire en France les réformes économiques que tous les pays développés ont fait. Même ceux qui ne sont pas dans l'euro, comme la Norvège ou la Nouvelle-Zélande. Vous voyez ? Donc le lien n'est pas évident, en fait.
Bien sûr.
Quant aux politiques, les pays auront toujours à défendre, même ceux qui ne pensent pas avoir un rôle spécial. Les pays qui pensent avoir un rôle spécial ou une mission dans le monde sont très peu nombreux, en fait. Il n'y en a même pas 10. Hein. Les autres pays, c'est-à-dire 190, ben, ils gèrent leurs intérêts de sécurité, de voisinage, ils défendent des idées, mais ça ne disparaîtra jamais. Ce qui change, c'est le processus, la méthode, l'interaction avec les systèmes externes, l'existence ou non d'alliances, etc. Ce qui change aussi, c'est le fait que les politiques étrangères dans les démocraties sont de plus en plus dépendantes de l'opinion publique. Et ça, c'est un des... On peut dire, dans des assemblées comme celle-ci, qui est un rassemblement de bonne volonté, quand on dit il faut faire ceci, cela pour améliorer les gouvernements, qui sont tous plus faibles qu'ils ne l'auraient été. Alors il y a un aspect positif, ils sont plus démocratiques, et il y a un aspect de fragilité.
Vous voulez dire que le temps où...
Mais ça ne disparaîtra pas, c'est le contenu et la méthode des politiques étrangères qui changent, mais pas les politiques étrangères. Même les États-Unis, même si Trump vous apparaît incohérent, il y a une politique étrangère américaine, qui est une politique perturbatrice, éventuellement très destructrice, mais elle existe, vous voyez.
Mais
ça ne va pas disparaître.
On peut avoir l'impression, on a connu par exemple en 1884-1885 à Berlin une vision européenne, une forme d'impérialisme pour sa croissance économique, son développement, n'est-ce pas, à aller à la conquête de l'Afrique. Or aujourd'hui, on a l'impression que c'est assez éclaté, chacun y va. C'est ce qu'on a appelé en anglais un peu beggar thy neighbor. Vous ne vous occupez pas, n'est-ce pas, de la pauvreté que vous créez dans cette course, cette forme de nouvelle ruée en direction de ces nations émergentes comme ceux d'Afrique.
Oui, il faut distinguer la tendance historique longue et la conjoncture. Dans la tendance historique, il y a une période dans l'histoire du monde où les Européens, puis les Américains, ont dominé le monde pendant 3 ou 4 siècles. Alors ça, c'est un travail pour les historiens futurs. Pourquoi est-ce que les Européens ont été capables, quelques petits pays en compétition entre eux, pas du tout unis, pourquoi est-ce qu'ils ont été capables de dominer les pays, se sont laissés coloniser facilement, d'autres pas du tout, il y a eu des affrontements, les éléments de division qui ont joué. Il me semble que le moment n'est pas encore venu pour aborder tout ça de façon sereine, objective, etc., parce que tout ça est mêlé à des conflits politiques énormes, encore contemporains. Ça, c'est la longue durée. Mais on est dans un monde où, de toute façon, quoi qu'il arrive, les Occidentaux ont perdu le monopole de la conduite des affaires du monde. Mais aucun autre ne l'a récupéré. La Chine n'a pas ce monopole. Elle ne l'aura jamais non plus toute seule. Les émergents non plus, parce qu'ils ne sont pas d'accord entre eux. Voyez ? Donc on est dans un monde semi-chaotique. Bon, ça ne veut pas dire la guerre générale, ça veut dire instabilité. Il n'y a pas de régulation globale, il n'y a pas de gouvernance globale. Puissance, personne ne domine complètement, et il faut qu'on s'habitue à gérer ça. Ça, c'est la tendance longue. Vous voyez ? Après, si on peut prendre si on est concentré sur le plus court terme, il me semble que chaque pays au monde, chaque pays d'Afrique, le Maroc en est un exemple spectaculaire avec sa politique en Afrique, depuis maintenant une vingtaine d'années, chaque pays d'Europe a sa vision, même si ça vous paraît incohérent. Chacun des pays, il prend des décisions tous les jours. Il dit oui, non, j'accepte ceci, je vote ce texte, je ne le vote pas. Donc de facto, il y a des politiques étrangères dans chaque pays. Elles sont peut-être mal expliquées, elles sont peut-être idiotes, elles sont peut-être... L'État forme une sorte de politique. Et quand on est au sein des Nations Unies, ou du G7 ou du G20, c'est juste le nom de la salle, en fait. Donc le résultat de ce qui se passe dans le monde est une sorte de combinaison aléatoire de l'intervention des États, donc chacun a sa propre idée, plus les puissances non étatiques, la puissance colossale des entreprises globales, plus quelques systèmes multilatéraux, plus l'économie illégale. Les derniers travaux disent que l'ensemble des économies illégales et des trafics représentent 10% du PIB mondial. C'est absolument géant. Donc c'est une sorte de foire d'empoigne où tout le monde intervient, où les États, en principe, ont encore le dernier mot. Encore qu'aux États-Unis, par exemple, si le pouvoir américain se réunit de Californie, les fameuses GAFA, Google, Amazon et compagnie. Les lois antitrust qui avaient été utilisées au 19e siècle étaient trop grands.
Sherman Act.
Est-ce qu'il pourrait...
1911.
Ah, d'accord, est-ce qu'on pourrait faire un Sherman Act aujourd'hui pour reprendre le contrôle de la puissance colossale des entreprises du numérique? C'est pas évident, hein?
Antitrust.
Donc, qui est-ce qui a le dernier mot aujourd'hui? Même ça, la question se pose. Il n'empêche que dans cette confusion, il y a des tas de bouts de politique étrangère qui s'harmonisent ou pas.
Alors, j'ai une question naturellement à mon voisin de gauche, sans jeu de mots, qui vous intéresse, mais c'est à lui que je vais la poser. This is about Africa and development. As you know, recently went viral when French President Mr. Macron visited Ghana and met with the Ghanaian President Mr. Akufo-Addo. And the Ghanaian President told him bluntly that we should stop relying on surpluses, budgetary surpluses from, say, countries like France to finance our health and education needs, and that we should work to ensure that our people migrating across the ocean through the Mediterranean and using huge energetic resources remain strengths to contribute to development. And that leadership is the key issue. You are running the Mandela Institute. In other words, it's all about leadership. So, what in this regard, you see, the nexus between foreign policy and development. One of my lead teachers used to say development begins at home. Is it something where we should start from in terms of really building African, whatever, national development or international projection?
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. So my comments are going to be, as you would expect, my observation on the behavior of Africa as a continent and the leadership as such. And the example that you cite, I think is very telling. So the president of Ghana tells the Africa should be doing. I think that our foreign policy and the stance in our formulation of foreign policy is flawed precisely because of we want to talk to other people as opposed to talking to ourselves literally, because where it starts, and my co-panelists cited China and the likes, the starting point has to be what Africa does. And if there is any preaching to be done by us, it should not be foreigners, it should be to ourselves. Because the foundation on which that interaction is going to happen has to be formed by us. It appears to me that if I were to simplify, foreign policy is rules which determine how you are going to work with other people, either in one of three ways. The outcome of that working relationship can be one of three ways. Either it will be supportive of your efforts, or it will be neutral, or it in fact will be detrimental to your efforts. In other words, it retards you. So my observation will be the following, that firstly, Africa does not take ownership of the creation of the foundation on which other people come to help you. And all too often, and I'll use my country as an example, we are also not clear that when you declare war on other people, they will react. And their reaction is likely to actually hamper your efforts in development. And so we like to preach to others. Then we behave in a manner that often provoke others. They react in protecting their own interests in a manner that then goes against our interests. So clearly, this is a very sensitive issue, and there are linkages which can be managed, which I would argue that we as Africans manage actually quite poorly. Yeah? We don't take ownership. We ask other people to do things for us, as opposed to doing things for ourselves which create an environment which they will find supportive of their willingness to come and work with us, helping us, not doing for us. They have to help us if they are so willing, but we have to do it for ourselves. And then we have to create an environment which is cognizant and realistic of our own strengths and weaknesses versus if you are leading a manner that makes other people use negative energy against your people, that's your responsibility.
In other words, that's what Mr. Mugabe did.
Well,
Not so?
yeah, that's what I would say.
So, in other words, if you see developmental states in Korea and Malaysia, countries that used to be at the same GDP level as African nations, as argued Mr. Nana Akufo-Addo, the fact that they had those kind of leaders focused, purpose-oriented, as opposed to the kind of leaders that are destructive as Mr. Mugabe, that's part of the problem of Africa. So you can have bad leaders and not good framework.
Yeah, and I think the second component, if I may, is that in today's world in particular, are not easy to disconnect from. Again, we often get people who behave as if you can create islands of countries and be completely impervious to what's going on outside, which is a total impossibility. So again, this awareness that the relationships, the value chains, your dependence on trade, for instance, the ICT age, all of these things, there is no way you can create walls which completely isolate you from the other side. So it's a delicate and constant management of that membrane, if you like, which connects you as your nation with everybody else. And you have to activities and vulnerabilities in order to manage it successfully.
Mr. Vedrin, on that topic, I think you read that piece from Mr. Akufo-Addo. Impressive, the type of reaction it has had on the internet.
Oui, je suis très content que vous ayez eu l'idée de citer ce qu'a dit le président du Ghana. D'ailleurs, pour ceux qui n'auraient pas lu, je conseille vivement de lire. Il y a un éditorial dans Jeune Afrique, mais on doit pouvoir trouver le texte intégral en anglais et en français ailleurs. Ce qu'a dit le président du Ghana au moment du passage rapide du président Macron, dont par ailleurs j'approuve tout à fait les orientations en politique étrangère. Donc, ce qu'a dit le président ghanéen, c'est formidable. C'est absolument formidable. Et ça me fait penser que le président Obama, dans son premier placement au Ghana, justement, c'est un pays plutôt bien géré, enfin bon, respectable sur le plan démocratique, etc. Pour les autres, c'est plus compliqué, en disant arrêtez de raconter que vos problèmes, c'est à cause du passé. Le passé est loin. Vous êtes indépendant depuis longtemps. Maintenant, vous êtes responsable. Et c'est vous qui devez prendre à bras-le-corps les questions. Alors, Obama, c'est Obama, bon. Mais je pense que dans la relation d'avenir que l'Europe doit construire maintenant avec l'Afrique, notamment pour co-gérer les flux migratoires, on sera obligé de les co-gérer entre espaces, disons, démographiquement interdépendants, entre l'Europe et l'Afrique, entre l'Australie et l'Asie du Sud-Est, les États-Unis et le Mexique, quand ils seront revenus à une politique rationnelle, entre la Côte d'Ivoire et ses voisins, entre l'Afrique du Sud et ses voisins. Bon. Donc je pense que dans cette évolution vers une co-gestion absurde, respect mutuel, de vérité. De vérité. Donc il faut évidemment que les Européens dépassent le paternalisme, la repentance qui ne sert à rien, tout ça, puis la mentalité d'aide compassionnelle, parce que ce n'est pas ça que demandent les partenaires africains. Et il faut que les partenaires africains abandonnent, disons, l'instrumentalisation politique du passé, des sortes de plaintes permanentes, pour aller sur le terrain de la co-responsabilité.
Bien sûr. Alors,
donc je le trouve absolument formidable, y compris la question que vous venez d'aborder, en disant mais comment ça se fait-il que des pays d'Asie du Sud-Est, au moment des indépendances, avaient le même PIB que les pays du Golfe de Guinée. Bon. Et c'est par les politiques européennes occidentales, même si elles ont pu être critiquables, mauvaises, ou les politiques des institutions multilatérales qui ont pu être absurdes à certains moments. Elles ont d'ailleurs changé de doctrine tous les 10 ans. Parce qu'on ne sait pas très bien ce qu'il faut faire pour développer, en fait. Puis on ne sait pas très bien comment développer les autres. Bon, donc finalement, chaque pays doit intégrer tout ça et être totalement responsable de ses actes aujourd'hui et demain.
Oui, la problématique du développement est entrée dans les réflexions universitaires, principalement à partir des années 50, les World Rostov, les étapes de la croissance. On connaît ces réflexions-là qui rappelaient à l'époque qu'il y avait des facteurs, n'est-ce pas, de production naturelles. Or, aujourd'hui, il y a d'autres facteurs, disons, qu'il faut créer. Comment une nation, un pays peut être attractif, peut être désirable, n'est-ce pas? Sa marque, son branding, comme on dit. Alors, tout cela, est-ce que aujourd'hui, ça favorise les pays africains avec les lacunes démocratiques que l'on rencontre sur le continent africain?
Oui, mais je ne pense pas qu'on puisse recopier. Les analyses qui ont été faites, ce sont des analyses rétrospectives sur le décollage économique de la Grande-Bretagne, puis des pays d'Europe. C'est complètement différent. D'abord, la plupart des pays qui se sont développés, contrairement à la, disons, croyance moderne, se sont développés avec un certain niveau de protectionnisme, deviennent une hérésie atroce qu'il faut enlever à tout prix. Bon, regardez l'histoire de le développement de l'Empire britannique, c'est absolument... Ils s'installent en Inde, la façon dont après ils arrivent à détruire à peu près l'industrie textile de l'Inde, pour que les Indiens soient obligés d'acheter les tissus fabriqués à Manchester, la façon dont ils détruisent l'agriculture indienne, qu'ils reconvertissent en culture de l'opium, et la façon dont il faut faire la guerre aux Chinois, parce que les horribles Chinois protectionnistes ne veulent pas acheter le bon opium indien.
1840.
Bon, on est dans un espèce de monde extravagant, mais quand on regarde l'histoire du développement, y compris les États-Unis, y compris la Grande-Bretagne et l'Europe, il y a une phase protectionniste. Ce qui fait que dans la période récente, où disons, la paix appliquée à des pays qui commencent à se développer, ce n'est pas absolument convaincant. Mais tout le système mondial, normalement, mais les phases du développement. Donc, on est obligé d'inventer quelque chose de nouveau. Je ne dis pas qu'il faut être protectionniste. Hein. Je fais une comparaison historique pour dire que ce n'est pas si simple. Deuxièmement, la pensée en Europe sur le développement a été totalement dominée par l'idée de l'aide. L'aide au développement. Mais personne n'a pu démontrer que l'aide permettait de se développer, en fait, puisqu'il y a la comparaison avec la Corée et compagnie. Vous voyez ? Et dans l'esprit de la plupart des Européens, là aussi plein de bonne volonté, gentils, qui veulent corriger les erreurs du passé, l'aide, c'était beaucoup plus important que le développement.
Plus de 700 milliards
parce que
de
ça
dollars
correspondait à une sorte de remords, en fait. Bon, alors tout ça, c'est le passé. Les Africains d'aujourd'hui ne demandent pas de l'aide, en fait.
Non.
Ils veulent de l'investissement, ils veulent l'accès au marché, ils veulent de la formation, ils veulent des échanges de partenariats, et puis ils jouent de toutes les cartes
contre la corruption.
De la mondialisation. Oui, la bonne gouvernance, naturellement.
Je pense que...
Donc le passé n'est pas une réponse suffisante,
bien sûr.
Y compris les études de Rostow.
Le passé, dit Confucius, est une lanterne accrochée au dos, il n'éclaire que le chemin parcouru. Je voudrais donner la parole à deux personnes, s'il vous plaît. La première, s'il vous plaît, vous vous présentez. Une question courte.
Confucius, ici, c'est bien.
Ouais. Please take the floor, identify yourself, and make it short. I have two questions, please.
Okay, my name is Kidani Kiros. I'm the director of the Institute for Peace and Security Studies of Addis Ababa University. My question is very simple. Development policy and foreign policy. Should we start from development policy or from foreign policy? In other words, should we base ourselves on our own development policy to come up to develop foreign policy, or the other way around? Because it has its own implication.
Mr. Moyo. Please, the second question is over there, please. And Ambassador Lewitt. Very quickly, that's the last question. Yes, please. Make it short. Hein?
Okay, Lan Xinxiang from China. J'ai une question pour M. Védrine. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la grande stratégie de M. Xi Jinping, la grande stratégie sur la direction de M. Xi Jinping, et particulièrement, qu'est-ce que vous pensez le projet très ambitieux, route de soie, the so-called One Belt, One Road?
Thank you. The floor here. That's the last question. Sorry.
Bonjour, Pascal Boniface, Iris Paris. Une question pour Hubert Védrine. Le débat entre le poids des multinationales et des États est un débat ancien. Mais si on part du principe que ceux qui avaient le pouvoir auparavant, c'est ceux qui avaient la terre, ensuite ceux qui avaient les usines, et maintenant c'est ceux qui ont les données, est-ce que les GAFA que tu as évoqués ne sont pas potentiellement en train de prendre une puissance plus importante que celle des États?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Moyo, to start with, foreign policy or development? What should start?
For me, foreign policy is a tool. You formulate policy because of your intent, what you want to use it for. So your clarity on what you want to achieve has to come first. So your development intentions with whoever I'm going to have them must be clear in my mind as I then structure those relationships.
Mr. Vedrin?
Moi, je pense que n'importe quel pays, même le plus petit et le plus faible, est obligé d'avoir une sorte de politique étrangère. Il est ami ou pas avec ses voisins, il dit oui ou non à des propositions, il vote ou il vote pas, etc. Ça, c'est le niveau qui s'impose à tout le monde. Après, le choix, c'est d'en faire une politique étrangère spectaculaire, ambitieuse, et on retombe dans la distinction que j'ai faite tout à l'heure entre les pays qui gèrent leurs intérêts, leurs problèmes, et ceux qui pensent avoir une mission spéciale pour s'occuper du monde entier. Bon, ce dont la France fait partie, et selon les jours, c'est admirable, émouvant, ou ridicule, ou absurde. Bon, ça dépend des fois, vous voyez. Donc c'est une question de degré, en fait. Quant à la stratégie qui n'est pas assez développée, doit l'avoir, et n'importe quel pays, même très développé, doit avoir une stratégie économique. Donc on n'a pas à choisir entre les deux. Et la question de la chronologie, on ne peut pas y répondre de façon théorique.
On passe
C'est
à
la
la
réponse
question
au
sur
cas par cas.
La question de la route de la soie. Question qu'il a soulevée.
Alors, c'est très intéressant de voir comment le président Xi a considéré que la Chine avait atteint un tel niveau maintenant qu'elle n'a plus besoin de suivre les conseils de Deng Xiaoping, qui disait on se développe sans provocation et on fait profil bas. Bon, alors, les deux successeurs ont fait ça, et Xi Jinping dit maintenant c'est terminé, on est à un tel niveau économique, c'est le numéro 1 bis maintenant. Bon, là, sur tous les plans. Jusqu'ici, la Chine a très habilement réussi à ce qu'il n'y ait pas de coalition des pays qui sont inquiets par cette évolution. La Corée du Sud, la Russie, les 2 tiers de l'Asie du Sud-Est, pas tous, les États-Unis, l'Inde, etc., etc. Bon. Donc là, on va voir. La Chine assume sa puissance. Là, et puis, il y a 2 éléments clés. Il y a la question des mers de Chine, où un jour ou l'autre, il y aura une crise aiguë entre les États-Unis et la Chine. Et ce qui se passe en Corée du Nord ne fait que reporter cette échéance. Parce qu'ils sont obligés de se concerter sur la Corée du Nord. Et sur la maîtrise des mers, non. On verra. Et l'affaire des routes de la soie, c'est une présentation extraordinairement astucieuse d'une opération politico-économique qui permet à la Chine de renforcer son influence sur 20
milliards de dollars,
plus les pays d'Afrique, où il y a une politique chinoise très importante. Bon, je dirais que du point de vue chinois, c'est intelligent, c'est audacieux. Il faut voir les suites. Vous voyez qu'il y a déjà des problèmes, même au Népal, même au Pakistan, où ils contestent les projets, l'implantation, le financement, tout ça. Il faut voir. Donc maintenant, une fois qu'on a fait l'analyse du projet chinois, c'est à chaque pays de se dire, par rapport à la Chine, je comprends leur démarche, en quoi est-ce que ça répond à mes intérêts, est-ce que je peux discuter avec eux, ou est-ce que déjà je ne peux plus? Avec un certain nombre de pays, même en Australie, il y a un lobby chinois, par exemple. Vous voyez.
Brièvement sur M. Boniface.
Donc ça dépend de chaque pays, en fait. Sur la question de Pascal Boniface, je suis absolument dire quand j'ai parlé des GAFA et du pouvoir américain. Mais je ne pense pas qu'il y aura une victoire définitive, complète, des grandes entreprises globales contre les États. Je m'attends plutôt à une espèce de bataille rangée, généralisée, une foire d'empoigne, où les pouvoirs publics quand même reprennent l'initiative, comme le commissaire Vestager en Europe sur les astuces fiscales des grandes entreprises de Californie, mais en même temps, ils ont façonné le monde. Et les gens qui ont conçu le téléphone portable ont plus influencé le monde que plusieurs générations de législateurs. Mais je ne vois pas de triomphe des uns ou des autres. Donc si on veut maintenir quand même des pouvoirs publics qui se préoccupent, ou bien dans le jargon OMC, enfin, les préférences collectives, etc. Là, c'est le choix politique d'intérêt général. Si on veut... est bien fatigué. Donc si on veut garder ça, il y a un enjeu gigantesque, parce que d'une façon ou d'une autre, on ne peut pas admettre que ce soit une dizaine d'entreprises globales américaines ou chinoises qui prennent les décisions globales pour l'humanité. Mais c'est un défi gigantesque.
Merci.
Et il faut donc que les entreprises politiques surmontent le choc numérique sans que ça les fasse couler.
Merci beaucoup. Je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de personnes qui auraient aimé poser des questions. Le temps imparti, malheureusement, s'est épuisé. Je vous quitte avec cette réflexion que je retiens d'une conférence à laquelle j'ai participé au mois d'octobre dernier à Riyad, en Arabie Saoudite, organisée par le roi d'Arabie Saoudite et le président de Rabat, Larry Summer. Il a dit ceci: si on regarde le monde d'ici 200 ans, avec le recul, deux phénomènes seront les tendances lourdes qui vont marquer le monde. Ce sera le rattrapage des pays en développement par rapport aux pays industrialisés, et la deuxième chose, ce sera, disons, le rôle de la technologie. Ce ne sera pas, dit-il, avait-il dit ce jour-là, ni les questions sur Trump, ni même le Moyen-Orient. Alors, donc, la problématique de la politique étrangère et du développement, ce sont des questions qui resteront encore longtemps devant nous, mais ne perdons pas de vue le bigger picture. Le temps tous et toutes pour votre attention et pour votre présence à cette discussion qui se continuera, j'espère, dehors, dans le hall. Thank you. Merci. Hein? Thank you. We do as we agree. Hein? Thank you. Yeah? Get my word, huh? Yeah? Was it okay? Yeah. Hey, my brother.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. We will now take a 30 minutes coffee break. We will reconvene for the InFocus sessions taking place both in the ballroom and in the Moroccan tents. Please don't hesitate to check your agenda on the AD Connect application for more details. Ladies and gentlemen, we will reconvene in 15 minutes.